Hello and welcome. Today, I kind of want to share something special. I want to share some of the best jokes I've ever heard in my life. And they all come at different points. And I know it seems like it's just an opportunity for me to tell stories to you, but it's not. I promise these jokes are well worth it. And you know, I'm not gonna tease you the whole time. So this is a completely original joke, never been told before anywhere, especially not by a Mr. Handsy in Fallout 3 when you get a house in Megaton. He definitely doesn't tell you this joke, okay? So here we go, all right? It's a good one, so you gotta bear with me, okay? Okay, so there are these, so you know how like the building block of all matter is the atom, right? So there are two of these atoms, and the atom is composed of subatomic particles, an electron, proton, and neutron. The electron is negatively charged while the proton is positively charged. And meanwhile, the neutron has a net zero charge, so it's kind of like the neutral particle. And okay, so now in this joke, we're gonna make, okay, just bear with me. We're gonna make some real big leaps of, you just gotta bear with me, okay? So, okay, so like imagine if these atoms of subatomic like particles, if these atoms had like the capacity for speech and language with one another, all right? And we're gonna assume they speak English, okay? So, okay, all right, so, all right, okay. Now when you have one atom, it's just an atom, and sometimes you have atoms combined together in the form of molecules, but we're not talking about a molecule here. We're talking about two atoms not linked by a bond of any sort, okay? Well, at least it's not implied that they're linked by any sort of bond. I mean, I know there's the ionic and the covalent bond. I took a chemistry class many moons ago. I know about the atom, all right? And that's what makes this joke really funny, okay? So you have two atoms, okay? And they're, okay, so in this universe, these atoms have like a cityscape structure where they've built like roadways, and along those roadways, they've built paths that they can walk along. Okay, and so like these atoms are walking, but not with their subatomic particles, but with a personified version of feet, okay? So these two atoms, okay, are walking down the street. Obviously they're on the sidewalk. Could you imagine if an atom was driving a car though, like down that street? That'd be wild. Okay, so two atoms are walking down the street, all right? And okay, so you remember they're able to talk to one another and they have the capacity for speech. One atom turns to the other. Okay, and in addition to speech, we have to also assume that they have some level of consciousness similar to like people, okay? These are personified atoms. These aren't how atoms act in real life. Well, we don't know how atoms act in real life because the concept of superposition at the electron level isn't really well defined in a way that makes sense, because sometimes when you observe particles at that area, like they'll act as a wave sometimes and then they'll act as a particle other times. And it's weird because there's this movie called What the Bleep Do We Know? And it has Marlee Matlin, I think. And it talks about how the mere act of observing causes photons from that subatomic particle to actually collide with another, and the act of being observed changes the particle and how the particle behaves. It's almost like the joke about Schrodinger's cat, and a lot of people go, oh, well, is the cat alive or dead? The point isn't whether or not it's alive or dead. The point is that you cannot know whether it's alive or dead when the cat's in the box with the poison. Now, why Schrodinger is doing this to his cats? I don't know. I've been putting my cats in boxes with poison for, the entire time I've had them, and not one of them has died. So I think, honestly, he might have had a defective cat when he wrote this premise. Because, okay, if you think about it, how many cats are just gonna randomly eat poison? They have an internalized survival instinct, right? They don't just randomly go about and eat anything. If you disguise the poison as maybe like a piece of turkey or something, but at that point, then there's an influence from like a malicious outsider. And that's sort of where you get into the Descartes act of like, how do we trust that the world is being presented through a lens that isn't some sort of like malicious imposter posing or masquerading as a divine being? And okay, well, now that we've established that these two atoms have independent agency of one another and are capable of thinking and reasoning, okay, these two atoms are walking down the street, okay, and one atom turns to the other. And using this thought that this atom has, this atom says, this is the first atom, by the way. We're going to have first atom and second atom just so we can define them. This isn't like Adam and Eve. I was watching a deconstruction the other day and it was talking about how, what if God was like the actual tempter in the Garden of Eden? Because why did he put the tree of good and evil in the garden with Adam and Eve? And it's not because original sin caused them to lose their immortality. It's actually interesting because there's the tree of life that God went and like put the flaming sword in front of or whatever before banishing them out of like Eden. But like God's all knowing and he's walking around and gee whiz, you know, like he knew they ate from the tree and he knew that the snake was telling Eve to eat from the tree. And I wonder if God knew when he told Adam not to eat from the tree of good and evil, if God knew that Adam was responsible for communicating that information to Eve after Eve was generated out of his rib. Even though Adam has no concept of right and wrong because he hasn't eaten from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, therefore has no understanding of it being improper to disobey the word of God. Because I don't know, if you put me into a random garden and you say, okay, you can eat from every tree except that tree, it's going to be like that pirate fairy story from the Elephant Men book. You know, Elephant Men Volume 1, I think we've all read that. Wounded Animals. If you haven't read it, check it out. Great novel, by the way. I'm not a furry, just like by adjacency. You know, I like anthropomorphized animals, and these animals were built for war machines. And honestly, sometimes I relate a lot to that because being in the military and sort of indoctrinated in this certain way of thinking about what it means to be from a country that represents freedom and democracy, even though we have a country that like endorses genocide and sort of bows down to dictators around the world. It's actually really embarrassing to see Donald Trump negotiate on a global stage because like in business, at least it was his money he's losing. Now he's taking our money and blowing it. Okay, so these two atoms are walking down the street, all right? And the first atom says, okay, so you remember how we established that these atoms have speech, okay? So the first atom says to the second atom, all right, I think, using that old noggin, I think I've lost an electron. Now you remember electrons are negatively charged particles. And the second atom goes, are you certain? Now this is where the linguistic sort of entendre comes into play because okay, so the second atom, when he says, are you certain? It's like, oh, well, you're saying you're coming out losing electrons and stuff. Have you gone radioactive? You know, like that song by the Imaginary Dragons or whatever. You remember when the Age of Dragons was ended because Seth Iscalus betrayed his own? That was wild. And then he went and fucked the bed of chaos and made the princess, Priscilla the crossbreed. I keep calling her a princess because in my mind, the true ascension path for Anor Londo is for it to be granted to Priscilla. I think Priscilla, of all the entities within Dark Souls, deserves Anor Londo the most. I mean, the illusion of Guinevere isn't even worth it, and you keep this beautiful soul locked away in the painted world of Ariamis. Like, what are you doing? Okay, so back to the atoms, okay? So, the first atom, I think I lost an electron, and you know, it could have been one of those photons we were talking about earlier. The second one goes, oh yeah, are you certain? And then the first electron, you know what they say? Oh fuck, I forgot the punchline. Well, you know, sometimes that's the way she goes. That's a completely original joke, by the way. You'll never see it told anywhere else. It's exclusively told here on Sticky Basket. Fuck, what were those positive particles? Neutrons and... He says, are you certain? I'm absolutely proton. Fuck. I'm electric, baby. Fuck, what is it? He says, yeah, I'm fucking certain I'm a goddamn atom. Niels Bohr went and discovered me using radioactive decay in a lead encased. Like, what were scientists back in the day doing? I feel like nowadays, if someone were to be like, yeah, I just got some radioactive particle and put it in this lead encased tube and started shooting it at thin leaves of gold, we'd look at them and be like, what are you fucking, what? Why would you do that? But meanwhile, these smart people, you know, that's like Gregor Mendel and his peas. That's, by the way, why I don't like the name Edward Gregorian, or why it rings as fake, is because if you consider like Gregorian genetics or Mendelian genetics, Gregor is the name. Gregorian is like of Gregor. It's like when someone's named like, I don't know. I'm absolutely positive. That's what it is. That's what it is. So fucking, okay, so we have, we have two protons and a nucleus. Okay, let's start from the top, all right? So we have the first atom, and we have the second atom. And the first atom, man, that fucking, I think I just fucking lost an electron, bud. And the second atom, dude, quit fucking freaking out. You act all radioactive all the time. I don't want to hang out with you anymore. Honestly, the bond we once shared is starting to nullify because we started covalently, and now as we grow apart from one another,